Our speaker tonight, some of you know, is a retired history teacher from Washington High School. Patricia Luthe taught history at the high school for 34 years. She was in the history department. She taught world civilization, economics, and history, were the courses that she usually taught. I know one of her interests is visiting as many presidential libraries as she can, and I don't remember your number.
All of the modern ones.
Okay, all right. And she loves to travel, and she is interested in a lot of different things. And her program tonight is, if you want to know an exact title of it, it is The Formation of the States, with emphasis on Illinois and its counties and early settlements. So, Patricia.
Thank you. First of all, I gave you a couple of handouts, and I want you to start with the map of the United States in the 1780s. And if you have questions as I go along, please feel free to interrupt and ask, with the exception of Richard. Everybody else is free to go ahead and ask questions. There has been a renewed interest in what our country looked like. There was a book published about a year ago called How the States Got Their Shape. My interest is more in how we immigrated across. And if you look at that first map, and I know it's in black and white, but the land boundaries of the English colonies are very overlapping because no one had an idea of what the geography of this nation was. And so when the first land grants were given, the very first thing is they were given between parallels, and they were given sea to sea. So Virginia went from the 36th parallel to the 30th, and if you look, Virginia goes all the way down into, actually I've seen maps where it goes into North Carolina and all the way up into Canada. So we are, in Illinois, we are Virginia. And then as other colonies got added, there are overlaps because Pennsylvania will run across Illinois, Connecticut will run across Illinois, Massachusetts will run across Illinois. So it's a really strange conglomerate, and it's a really haphazard thing. The settlers measured by rivers, by rocks, by oak trees, and so later surveying had to be done and boundary lines put in. In the eastern states, the boundaries, again, are very, very haphazard. And note, there is no West Virginia. West Virginia does not appear until during the American Civil War. And there is no Vermont, because Vermont is part of Massachusetts and will remain so for the next, well into the post-revolutionary era. It's going to be our first new state. The thing that happens is we fight our Revolutionary War, and surprise, surprise, we win, which is unbelievable. Will Rogers said years ago that America never lost a war or won a treaty. He's wrong. The treaty that ended the American Revolutionary War, we won. We had excellent negotiators, superb negotiators sent to Paris. Lots of treaties in Paris. I suspect it was a much nicer place to be than Boston or Connecticut or Rhode Island. I mean, I think they went for the extracurricular activities as much as working on the treaties. But in the Treaty of Paris, we received all of the land from Maine all the way over to the Mississippi River and down to Florida, and Florida was Spanish. The first permanent settlement in the United States was Spanish. It was not English. It was St. Augustine in 1685, though Pensacola says they were actually settled first. Virginia is, did I say 16? I'm sorry, 1585. Virginia starts settling in the 1600s. And so all of this land is ours now, and we don't really, frankly, know what to do with it. We finally formed a government. We've been working under the Continental Congress, and we formed a government called the Articles of Confederation. And people for over a century taught the Articles of Confederation, and the Confederation Congress was basically a useless government. It was a confederation. It had no single strong central power. We didn't want a president. We didn't want a king. So we separated the power, and we made a weak central government, and it was done on purpose. because of the results of the war. But it was not a horrible government. These are the people who sent Franklin, Adams, Jefferson, among others, to negotiate the peace treaty. I mean, that's not an ineffectual government. These people passed 2 laws that we're still living with today. I really doubt if Congress now will pass a law that somebody's going to be living with 250 years from now. I mean, I would just pass out here if they did. There's just no way. But this government takes effect and it passes 2 extremely, extremely important laws. They're called, in our part of the world, the Northwest Ordinance. And if you look at the other side of the colonial map, it shows you the Northwest Ordinance and the Northwest Territory. And it specifically says no fewer than 5 or more than 7 states shall be made from this territory. And the most relevant part of it really is the land ordinance. And if you can see the top square, it shows you how the land is divided. And this is really important to us in Illinois. It divides the land into sections. And each section is 6 square miles, and each township is 6 square miles, and within that, each has a section of 1 square mile. And this is the way the land is sold. So if you go driving in Illinois or Ohio, if you keep going right, you're going to wind up somewhere. You know, I mean, you can't get lost. We're square. Unless you wind up with a river and no bridge, you're square. That doesn't happen out east. You take a look at some of those roads and they're meandering. I love Washington, D.C. and the circles. That's a great deal of fun to deal with. But in Illinois and in the Northwest and in the Southwest Ordinance, we have even sections. And Section 16 was to be set aside for education. We considered education that important in 1785. And some of the townships sold Section 16 right away and built their little school. There are a few that hung on to the area and rented it out, and their schools did very well. There's a little school down near where my parents were from in Lawrenceville area, and they had oil wells on their school grounds. So they didn't have much of a budget problem until modern time. I mean, really modern times. And the oil wells have stopped producing as much. So we start with this Northwest Ordinance, and we are the West. And all of the states, Virginia, Massachusetts, Connecticut, that had these overlapping land claims were forced to give them up to join the Union. So we've become this new territory. They also created a governmental ordinance, a way for states to come into the Union. The Constitution doesn't really say anything about states coming into the Union. So in 1787, they passed a governmental ordinance. And it said that when you had 5,000 males, and they meant white males over 21, you could form a territorial government. You could send a non-voting representative to Congress. You could have a territorial governor. You could start asking for permission to write a constitution. Quite frankly, Puerto Rico is still under that plan. They're still waiting to become a state. When you have 60,000 males, white, 21, you can petition for statehood, petition for the right to write a constitution, to put it into effect, and go on from there. And the states start progressing. And a strange thing happens. Because our Constitution takes effect, the Articles are thrown out, and the Constitution takes effect, we have a stronger central government, and we start worrying more about slave-free. So states start coming into the Union free slave together. And so anytime you see a state enter, up until 1850, you're going to see one slave state, one free state come in. So you get Vermont in 1791, you get Kentucky in 1792. That's the way it's going to be. You get Ohio in 1803, you get Alabama in 1803-4. I'm not quite sure what year. But they come in together. Other than Ohio, I guess, messed up and they didn't sign the final papers. So if you look in a real history book about Ohio, there's a little asterisk that says they signed their statehood papers in 1955 or 54. So they're not really the fourth state to come into the Union. They're kind of almost the last, but anyway, they still say they're number 4. So you get your territory formed. In the Northwest Territory, there was not supposed to be slavery. In the Southwest Territory, slavery could be allowed. It wasn't mandatory, but it could be allowed. But there are slaves in every state, and there are slaves in Illinois also. There are slaves in Cairo. There are slaves in Illinois. We're not all pure and innocent about that kind of thing. We start building our state, we start forming our government, we elect our first president, George Washington, unanimously, his first term in office, and then we go on from there, and it's electors electing. You all understand the Electoral College, right? There's going to be a quiz later. You all understand the Electoral College and how that works? We elect Washington, and then John Adams, and the Electoral College has a mess, and then Jefferson comes in. Jefferson had a vision for this country. His party and the Constitution didn't provide for political parties either. It's a very bare bones document. But his party was the Democratic Republican Party, and he was a Democrat in the sense that he believed in the equality of people, white people, because he had slaves. He believed, well, and in the equality of man, and he meant men, not women. He believed in that, but he wanted our states to be equal. And so when he envisions our country, he envisions the states actually in equal size. So as you move out, for example, Dakotas, Nebraska, and Kansas are 3 degrees high. Montana, Wyoming, Colorado are all 4 degrees high. Washington, Oregon, Wyoming, and the Dakotas are 7 degrees wide. They're trying the party was trying to stick with Jefferson's vision of equality and size. It does and it doesn't make sense, because you're not dealing with land types then. But this is the way we start to settle. We also start selling land and start giving land away. In Ohio, on the eastern side of Ohio, up by the lake, is an area called the Western Reserve. Some of you may have heard of Case Western Reserve University. It deals with the fact that this is land given to the military. So soldiers in Washington's army could get this land and keep it and settle there, or they could sell it. There's reserve land in Illinois. If you go over by Quincy, there's a strip of land in Illinois that was a reserve area, again, to be given to the military for their service in lieu of bonuses and payments, and to appreciate the hardships that they went through. So we start distributing this land. America had no income tax. We don't get the income tax until the early 1900s. We made our money off of tariffs and off of land sales. So one of the first things that happened after we divided into these wonderful townships and sections is we started selling them off. And we didn't have a high price on them. It was in, 1796, you paid $2 an acre. Doesn't sound bad at all. You had to buy 320 acres, and you had to pay for it in 2 years in full. That's a lot of money. Most people were not making $1 a week. And that, then you still had to feed and clothe and everything else. So there's constant pressure after that first land bill to bring the price down. And I'm certainly not going to ask you to memorize these, but we do get a situation where it gets better. In 1800, we make it 320 acres, but you have 4 years to pay. In 1804, it's 160 acres with 4 years to pay. In 1820, it's 80 acres, and we drop the price to $1.25 an acre. So we're getting more affordable. And even then, in 1820, there is a push for what's referred to as the Homestead Act, where you could go out, build a small cabin or a hut, and claim land for free. We wanted free land. We didn't even want to pay $1.25 an acre for it. I mean, isn't that typical of Americans? Look at what happened Black Friday and stampedes. We don't want to pay for anything, that's the American way. So we're petitioning and pushing for a Homestead Act, which will be finally passed under the Lincoln administration. We have a few presidents who actually follow campaign pledges and promises, and Lincoln had pushed for free land, and ultimately we get free land. It's still a tough situation to settle. And Ohio gets in, as I said, in 1803. Then the next territory is the Indiana Territory in our area. So if you look at the next map, you're starting to see it fill in. And the Indiana Territory governs Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, not just Indiana. And it's governed from Vincennes, and if you look down in southern Illinois, it's right across the river from Wayne County. And the governor of the Indiana Territory is William Henry Harrison, who will become President of the United States. Illinois, as with most of the early states, is settled along the rivers. So you see our early settlements and our early counties along the Wabash on the east side, and the Ohio on the south, and the Mississippi on the west. So we're settled in a horseshoe shape, with the exception of Galena. And Galena gets settled very early because they discover lead there, and it's an important product. It's important enough that the type of lead they discover in Galena is called Galena. They get to name it. But we settle along this horseshoe, and we're governed from Indiana. We're not particularly thrilled about being governed from Indiana, but we're governed from Indiana. And things are happening. Have you all heard of the great earthquake of 1811? It's almost 200 years now. The New Madrid Fault moved. The New Madrid is in southern Missouri, in the Boot Hill of Missouri area, and the fault moved, and the Mississippi River flowed backward, and church bells in Boston rang. We didn't have a lot of people killed because there's frankly nobody here. You know, Illinois doesn't have 5,000 people yet in 1811. We're going to say we do, by the way, but we tended to count horses and cows in our 5,000 people. We're a little, you know, we talk about Chicago politics. It's not just Chicago politics. We've been doing this for a long time. So we start settlement here. We're starting to move into southern Illinois. Indiana's governing us. We decide to elect, we've got our 5,000 people, we're going to elect a territorial governor. And we elect Ninian Edwards, our first territorial governor. He keeps trying to count people. He thinks we have 3,000 white men to go ahead and get to the second stage. We start counting people up in Wisconsin as part of Illinois, up as far as Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, which is a good ways up. And we're counting them, and we're trying to make our state go. That's what we're trying to do. The Illinois people are very cognizant, very aware of what's going on in the east, and the Erie Canal has been built. And so transportation is very important. The waterways have always been important. We are moving goods along the Great Lakes. Indiana, in 1816, petitions to come into the Union. And the line, if you looked at the map, the line is supposed to go straight across the tip of Lake Michigan for Indiana also. And I know you don't have an Indiana map with you, but let's assume we all have one in our head. It's supposed to go straight across. But that would leave Indiana with no access to the lake. So the Indiana people, since they're coming in, they grab part of Michigan. They move the border up so they can have access to the lake, get the transportation from the Erie Canal down through the lakes, and have it as a good center for moving farm goods, because that's basically what Indiana is at this time. So they made that land grab. Illinois becomes a territory. We are now all the Illinois territory. We're governing Michigan and we're governing Wisconsin. And so when we, go ahead.
So Michigan wasn't officially a state yet. That's why Indiana could do that.
Mm-hmm. Indiana's governing the other 4 states. Illinois is now governing 3. Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Well, Indiana made that land grab, and Illinois would, if you look, if it goes along the bottom of Lake Michigan, we're going to be a short state, and we're not going to have access to lakes and transportation, or Chicago, and isn't that coming up again now? Somebody just wanted to petition and get Chicago out of Illinois. It wasn't in Illinois. We made a land grab. We moved the boundary up so that we could get Lake Michigan territory. Have you ever wondered why Michigan is split in two parts? That makes no sense at all, except Indiana grabbed part of Michigan, Illinois grabbed part of Wisconsin, Michigan's going to come in next. There's nothing left for her to grab except part of Wisconsin, and then there's poor little scrunched up Wisconsin. You know, she's last in, she gets the leftovers, and Michigan gets the UP. So Illinois made the land grab. We wound up taking control in Chicago. We decide to create counties and townships in the state of Illinois. I just saw a blurb in the newspaper that the state with the most forms of local government is, guess what? Illinois. Counties were a system of government that came in from the south, and most of our settlers came in from the south in this horseshoe area. Galena was even a very southern-leaning area. It was pro-slave. Very few came in from New England, but when the New Englanders came in, they brought in the township form of government, so we merged the two. So we have county and township government. There's a horrendous overlap, we all know it, don't know what to do about it. And then Illinois has all of these counties. We have 102. Why? No, I don't understand. We have all these school districts. You know, Wyoming has one school district, the whole state. We don't do that here. That might make sense. Pardon me, that's an editorial comment about Illinois government. So we bring in counties, we have sheriffs that we elect the coroner. We want to elect everybody. Well, we still do, we elect judges. Do you all know who you vote for when you vote yes and no on the judges? Do you all know who you vote for when you vote yes or no on the Illinois U of I Board of Trustees? I mean, really, do we check that out? But we elect all of these officials, and we decided to do that. We made special provisions for citizenship because one of the leading citizens of Illinois at this time was Pierre Menard, and he wasn't United States born. So we made special provisions so that he could be elected to the U.S. Senate. I mean, we just did. We knew we were going to elect him to the Senate. The powers that be in Illinois knew who they were electing already before they wrote the Constitution. And that surprises all of you, right? But we did that. We made a situation where we couldn't figure out where to put the capital. So we put it at Kaskaskia, which is on the western border. You all know where Kaskaskia is. And we were lucky to have it, frankly. We wouldn't have been part of this country. Do you all know who George Rogers Clark was? In the Revolutionary War, he marched down from Fort Pitt and all the way over to Kaskaskia, Cahokia, and then back to Vincennes to capture it for the Americans. Back to Vincennes, Indiana. So he kept us together, and we made this capital, and it's a, typical, we put it on the river, actually in the river. All that's left of Kaskaskia right now is an island that you have to reach from the Missouri side. But it is Illinois land. In the 1980s, we negotiated with Missouri, and we gave them some land, and they gave us back Kaskaskia because the river had changed. For a while, it was Missouri, which is a little strange for the first capital of Illinois, but, it's America. We dealt with our problems. We decided to go ahead and petition to become part of the United States. And in 1818 we did. We elected Shadrach Bond, our first governor. He's elected unanimously, the only governor we've elected unanimously. He didn't go to jail.
And I'm from Bond County.
Yes, and we named counties after him. And I don't know if you've seen pictures of Shadrach Bond or not, but this is Shadrach Bond. Yeah. Good person, right? Sorry. But we elected him governor. We, let me see. We put Pierre Menard was elected. We elected John McLean, and we sent Ninian Edwards and Jesse Thomas to the United States Senate. Thomas had been instrumental in getting the Constitution adopted and getting us into the Union. It was, he was anti-slavery. He comes up later in conjunction with trying to prevent the spread of slavery. We do have quite a history of abolitionists in here to go with the fact that we have slaves in Illinois. It was not supposed to be slaves. We grandfathered in the idea of indentured servants. You all know about indentured servants, right? They came over here and were supposed to work for a period of time and then gain their freedom. That's actually the way the very first slaves got here. They were indentured servants. They did not come as slaves. But we grandfathered them in, and we just kind of ignored the fact that there were slaves here. As we move closer to the American Civil War, it becomes more evident that Illinois is split north-south the way the rest of the nation is. I want to specifically mention, because we tend to think of Illinois as a northern state, Coles County, Illinois, with Charleston as the center of Coles County. Charleston's the county seat. Half of the guys who went to the Civil War in Coles County went to the Confederacy. Half, that far north. There was talk of secession and dividing Illinois so that part of it would go with the Confederacy. Stephen A. Douglas did yeoman's work, literally killed himself, going to the southern part of our state, southern Indiana and Ohio, to try and keep those people loyal to the Union. It was a very difficult job. That's when we get West Virginia. Those people seceded from Virginia. They were anti-slavery, but more than that, anti the wealthy autocrats who were running Virginia. So you get a mix in there, and Illinois furnished some really important abolitionists. You've all heard of Owen Lovejoy, who had press at Alton. Elijah Lovejoy. His brother Owen was from Ottawa area, and he participated in what became known as the New England Immigrant Aid Society to try and get Free State people into Kansas. Matthew Thayer out of Bloomington gave money to get Free State people into Kansas to try and help them turn Kansas into a free state after we stopped with the one slave, one free coming in. And so Illinois is pivotal in that, and our whole formation is pivotal. Our land prices followed what happens in the rest of the nation. We had a recession in the early 1800s, and land prices fell. $2 an acre was too much for it even then. The United States government got back over 300,000 acres that people couldn't pay for. I mean, we think it's bad now, and it is, but we've had those times happen before. Illinois had, when we became a state, we had over $20,000 in debt. And that, again, that doesn't sound like much, but keep in mind, people are earning $1 a week. Within 2 years, we had it paid off. That's unbelievable. Now, wouldn't that be wonderful if we could do that now? Yeah. I don't see that happening either, frankly. But things change. We have a horrible, horrible depression in 1837, maybe even worse than the Great Depression of 1929. The 1837 depression might not have been worse only because you had people living on the farms and you didn't have the starvation and the malnutrition that you get in 1929. But land values fell horrendously. Land in McLean County in 1837 was selling at $25 an acre. I mean, you're talking really good land. It was expensive. The recession hit, the price fell to $5 an acre. Your wealth was just wiped out. Hogs were selling for $1.100. I mean, it was just unbelievable. You got nothing. You were better off butchering and eating and salting and giving to your neighbors than you were selling your animals. By the 1850s, the price in McLean County had only gone back up to $5.25 an acre. I mean, it was a horrible recovery even. So when you're looking at hard times, and we are now, it happens. I mean, and it's awful. We had bank failures. There's another surprise. We had a huge bank at Cairo. The story is that the bank at Cairo was very well off, and the bank at Shawneetown, way down south, was very, very wealthy, and that Chicago went down supposedly to Shawneetown to get money to build, and Shawneetown wouldn't lend them any because they were an upstart city and nobody was going to live in that marsh, and that's what it was, a marsh. And then, you know, now you have Chicago, and where's Shawneetown? But bank failures, and we got stuck with debt from bank failures. In the 1840s, Illinois spent over $400,000 bailing out banks. Again, even in the 1840s, that's a horrendous amount of money. Your wages are a little better, but the Panic of 1837 drove wages in this area down to 5 cents a day. I mean, that's, well, nothing was making money. There's no way you could make money either. And that was, you know, you were doing hard labor at 5 cents a day. You were working daylight to dusk, 6 days a week. So we're paying off a lot of debts. And while we're doing this, we're forming counties. And you saw the first counties in the state of Illinois down in there. And I ran off some other maps that show you how the counties progress and how they divided as the state grew. Our very first county is St. Clair County, and all of our counties are named for specific people. Arthur St. Clair had been a brigadier general under Washington. He had been the governor of the Northwest Territory for a while. Then you have Randolph County coming in, I'm not going to list them all, but Randolph coming in as number 2, Madison, Johnson, Gallatin. Gallatin was Secretary of the Treasury under Jefferson, right? You all know Albert Gallatin. 1814, Edwards and White, Monroe. These are all your southern counties. Tazewell County came in number 49. It had been part of Sangamon County. It was split off from Springfield, and it's named after Henry Tazewell, who was a Virginian, went to the College of William and Mary. He was elected to the U.S. Congress from Virginia, replaced John Marshall. He was elected governor of Virginia. He was elected to the Senate from the state of Virginia. Did not live in Illinois, but we named the county after him, and that is quite typical. McLean County, which is the largest county in Illinois still, was named after John McLean, who also didn't live there. But we were honoring the people as we did that. And it tells you, and you can look it up, we have 649 square miles in Tazewell County. So it's a good-sized county. And it's shaped in part because of the river, in part because of the way the maps were drawn, but it's still townships and sections. It's still square, and you can still get where you're going. And I'm going to stop and see if you have any questions. I think I bored you enough today already.
Did you say McLean is the biggest county in Illinois?
McLean is the largest in area in Illinois. And Cook is named after Daniel Cook, who helped create the first Constitution. He wanted to have widows and single women over 21 be allowed to vote and participate in government. A real radical. I mean, really a radical. Because nobody believes women should do that. You know, they're going to get the vapors and pass out or something if they see a politician or listen to a speech. Question?
How many counties did you say Illinois now has?
102.
Pardon?
102. Some of them very small. Joe Davies County, for instance, up north is very tiny. Question?
With the logistics of an election, with people scattered all over?
Oh, it was horribly scattered. Can you imagine 5,000 people in this whole state? This is a big state.
I mean, how did they count votes? How did they?
Same way they count them today in some of the areas. Looks, you know, and they're voice votes, right? You know, we don't have secret ballot for years, actually over 100 years yet. So it's voice votes. So the elections, you pretty well know going in who's going to win that election. And that's why some of the elections were very colorful. William Henry Harrison's log cabin campaign also had a lot of whiskey with it. And there was no rule that you shut down bars on election day. So you had some very colorful scenes election day as people went to the polls. And as I said, when we counted for territorial government, we went all the way up to Wisconsin to count for our 60,000 men. Didn't have any, I'm sure we were nowhere close to 60,000 men. Illinois has a little over 11.5 million people today. And there's still some areas that are pretty spread out. So you think about 60,000, you know, or 5,000. Washington's bigger than 5,000. Other questions?
You said you came from Lawrenceville?
Kind of. My family heritage is down there.
That's where I came from. When you mentioned the oil and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, they were south of Albany. My parents grew up south of Albany. My mother grew up south of Albany. So, do you know where Albany is?
Yes, I've been there many times.
Yes.
The home of the white squirrel.
Home of the white squirrels, and everybody calls it only. Only.
Yeah. And you were talking about oil. There was some places that had special names because of so many oil wells in a small area.
There was a lot of oil in Richland County, Lawrence County. Illinois still has the largest coal reserve in the nation. Unfortunately, it's soft coal, which means that it's highly pollutant, but we could exist for probably a couple centuries on Illinois coal if we could figure out a way to clean it up. I mean, it's there, and there are huge deposits of it. I brought some books. I have Illinois maps that show where the coal deposits are, where the oil deposits are. I didn't know how much you wanted me to go into. I get started and tend to go on. I also didn't mention the Native Americans that we shoved out, and Lincoln's famous war experience in the Black Hawk War. You know the Black Hawk Indians came back across from Iowa. They'd been driven into Iowa. They came with women and children to harvest their crop. So they invaded us, and we had to attack them. And so then we chased them down and chased them out of Illinois because those vicious Indians were getting corn and catching fish. I mean, you know, those dastardly people.
Were you editorializing that?
No. There's a line in a book called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee that deals with the fact that the United States government still controls a lot of Native American money. And the author keeps commenting that America is in this kind of debt and feels that Indians can't handle their own money. Which has some real validity there, too. This summer, we were going through upper New York State and through an Indian reservation, and some Native American with a very good sense of humor had a big sign out that said, "The water's still flowing and the grass is still growing," because America's treaties with the Indians all said, this is your land as long as the grass grows and the water flows. And I think they're in very small print, and it said, or until we want it. You know, I think that was what they couldn't read. So, any other questions? I did not spend a lot of time with counties, but I hope you get an idea of how we migrated in the progression. And we are a mixed state. We just are. And a lot of foreigners, my grandma used to call them foreigners, came in and settled in this town.
And then how did Vandalia become a capital?
Kaskaskia was
Was Vandalia after Kaskaskia?
Yes, Kaskaskia was picked because they were just trying to find something. And so then they hunted and they came on Vandalia because Vandalia is in the southern part of the state. That's where the population was. And Vandalia built a brand new Capitol building right before it got hijacked to Springfield. Lincoln and a group of other legislators referred to as the Long Nine because they were all over 6 feet tall, got together and cut a political deal. Lincoln was a politician, I mean through and through, he really was. And they cut a political deal to move the Capitol to Springfield. Vandalia hoped to keep it there by building a new building, and they couldn't overcome the votes. They couldn't overcome the political behind-the-scenes dealing. It's Illinois. That's the way we are. Anything else? Well, I hope I have not bored you too much, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much.
I think it's nice to have a program like this once in a while where we feel like, or I always liked school growing up, and I guess that's why I became a teacher. And I love it when I feel like I'm learning something and remembering something that I'd kind of forgotten. So I really appreciate having a teacher for our program tonight.